I am Brittany, 27 years old. Since birth, I've been treated as the black sheep by my family. My brother Chris graduated from a prestigious university and has been walking the path of an elite. My sister Vanessa, a housewife now, has always been clever, having graduated from the same prestigious university as my brother. My parents have always been proud of them, constantly referring to them as our pride and joy. On the other hand, I chose to work right after high school instead of pursuing further education. I wanted to become independent sooner and carve my own path through my abilities. However, my family dismissed this choice, continuously looking down on me as a dropout because I didn't go to college. This was their ultimate proof that I was the failure of the family. From a young age, I have received different treatment compared to Chris and Vanessa. Every time my siblings achieved something, my parents would praise them extravagantly. If Chris won a math contest, the entire family would go out for a celebratory dinner, and if Vanessa was listed among the top students at her university, my mother would proudly call all our relatives. But when I won a prize at an art contest, my mother's reaction was, "Anyone could get that, right?" Despite this, I continued to strive for my family's approval. My grades were not bad, but since they were not as outstanding as my siblings, whatever I did was just considered mediocre. Even when I was praised by my teacher at a piano recital, I was told, "It's not like you're going to music school, so it doesn't matter." I gradually came to realize that no matter how hard I tried, it was futile. After high school, I decided not to go to college but to work instead. When I told my family, the dinner table fell silent for a moment. "So, you mean to say you'll be stuck in low-paying jobs all your life?" My sister laughed. "Well, someone has to do the menial jobs for society to function," my brother shrugged. My parents sighed in dismay and said nothing more to me. That was their sign of disappointment. But I was different. Although I didn't go to college, I didn't end up just another worker. After entering the workforce, I worked hard, was recognized by my superiors, and continued to achieve results. Now, at 27, I have succeeded as an executive in a company and earn a high income. But I haven't told my family any of this. They wouldn't listen to me anyway. One day, I received an invitation to Christmas dinner from my mother. It's an annual family gathering, but I had been skipping it for years, citing work. This year, tempted by my mother's insistence, "Show your face," for once I decided to attend, harboring a faint hope that perhaps our relationship might improve. On the day of the dinner, when I entered the private room of the upscale restaurant, my entire family was already there. Chris, his wife Michelle, and their sons Aaron and Wesley were present. So were Vanessa, her husband Thomas, and their 3 daughters, Mia, Nicole, and Tess. My parents were happily watching their grandchildren, engaging in lively conversation. "You finally made it, Brittany," Vanessa smiled. I felt a bit relieved. Maybe they would welcome me normally this time. That sweet thought crossed my mind. But in the next moment, Chris laughed. "We're short of chairs. What about Brittany's seat?" Then my mother coldly stated, "Since you're just a high school graduate, you should sit on the floor." Everyone in the family laughed, even Chris's children snickered at me. "You're joking, right?" I asked, disbelief in my eyes. But my mother's expression didn't change as she said, "It's nostalgic, isn't it? Sitting on the floor like when you were a child. Back then, as a child, I was often pushed aside after my siblings, and if there were no seats, I was forced to sit on the floor. But I thought it was okay because I was just a kid. But now it's different. I'm a 27-year-old adult. Even my nieces and nephews have proper seats, so why am I the only one being forced to sit on the floor?" "Brittany, since you're just a high school graduate, be humble," Chris laughed. "Yes, people at the bottom of society are different from us." Vanessa sipped her wine. The entire family was laughing at me. At that moment, I realized they would never see me as an equal. No matter what I did or how hard I tried, I would always be the failure in this family. Anger welled up inside me. With frustration and humiliation shaking my body, I still managed to suppress my emotions and quietly headed towards the door. "What's wrong? Did you get upset?" Chris sneered sarcastically. "How selfish. You should just sit quietly," Vanessa added. "Let's start the meal." My mother spoke as if nothing had happened. I didn't say anything. I just looked around at them. Then, I said just one sentence. "Sorry for disturbing you all." With that, I left the private room. I could hear the family stirring behind me. "Wait, Brittany." My mother's voice followed me, but I didn't look back. At that moment, I decided. I was done with this family. I would no longer give a part of my life to people who look down on me and ridicule me. They would probably realize what they had lost, but not anytime soon. As I left the restaurant, I felt the cold winter air and took a deep breath. Anger and frustration swirled inside me, yet curiously, no tears came. Crying over it seemed foolish now. My family had always looked down on me, mocked me, and trampled on my efforts. It had been that way since childhood. There was no reason to engage with them any longer. My smartphone vibrated. Without checking, I knew it was messages from my family. Sure enough, names like Chris, Vanessa, and my mother appeared on the notification screen. From my mother: "After all the trouble of inviting you, aren't you being rude?" Chris said, "Grow up, Brittany. It was just a joke, right?" Vanessa commented, "Are you satisfied with ruining a family gathering? You're too selfish." I sighed and deleted those messages unread. Their words could no longer reach my heart. They had always thought of me as a failure. They must have thought I was just a high school graduate, stuck in low-wage jobs, desperately working. But the reality was different. I now hold a position and earn an income that anyone would envy. Right after high school, I started working as an apprentice in an administrative role at a small company. I had no special skills, but lacking academic credentials, I had to work harder than anyone. I arrived earlier and left later than anyone else each day. I took on tasks no one else wanted and thought thoroughly about how to correct any mistakes I made. My attitude was noticed by my supervisor then, who is now president of my company, Mr. Patrick Brown. He valued real ability and effort over academic background. "Brittany, you work hard. Unlike the others, you have grit," he told me 2 years after I joined. I was thrilled. For the first time, I felt that someone recognized my efforts. Later, Patrick started his own company from scratch. Now, he's well known in the industry for growing his business into a renowned enterprise. When I heard he was starting his own company, I decided without hesitation to follow him. I wanted to grow further using what I had learned under him. Under his leadership, where skills are valued over academic degrees, I knew I could test my own abilities. So I worked even harder. I learned about management, gained marketing knowledge, and began to contribute to the company's growth. Patrick did not overlook my efforts and promoted me to increasingly important positions. At 23, I became the leader of the sales department. I dramatically increased the company's revenue and earned the trust of our clients. At 26, I was promoted to an executive role. Now at 27, I am part of the management team. My income is more than my family could imagine. Ironically, I have been financially supporting my brother's children's education. My parents and his family probably never deeply considered where that money came from, just assuming it was only natural for the family. However, in reality, it was my earnings they looked down upon that allowed their children to attend good schools. I scrolled through my smartphone and opened a folder. It was filled with screenshots of insulting messages from my family over the years. Too arrogant for a high school grad, bottom of society, useless, each word now far removed from my current reality. I couldn't just cut ties, I decided to take legal action. I planned to present these past insults and emotional abuse as evidence and claim damages for mental anguish. I also decided to immediately stop supporting my brother's children's education. I sent one final message to my family. Please do not contact me anymore. I do not consider you my family. Then, I turned off my smartphone. I was no longer their failure. I had made it here on my own strength. Now it was their turn to pay for insulting me. A few days had passed since that humiliating Christmas dinner. Since that incident, I had completely ignored any attempts by my family to contact me. My smartphone continued to display unread messages and missed calls from my mother, brother, and sister. I no longer felt the need to listen to their words. However, I wasn't planning to simply ignore my family and leave it at that. They had looked down upon and ridiculed me, and I was determined to make them pay a price for their actions. I quietly, yet assuredly, began preparing to corner them. Firstly, I initiated the process of cutting off the educational financial support I had been providing for Chris's children. Originally, I had been partially funding the tuition for Chris's eldest son, Aaron, and his younger brother, Wesley. Chris, a graduate of a prestigious university and employed at a major corporation, had a tendency to live beyond his means due to his pretentious nature. He had purchased a house in an upscale neighborhood, drove foreign cars, and wore designer brands. His wife, Michelle, also had a penchant for luxury and frequently went to parties and on trips. Because of this, their household finances were always in dire straits. The tuition fees for their children, who attended a private prestigious school, were especially a significant burden, costing tens of thousands of dollars annually. Chris and his wife naturally sought financial help from my parents. However, my parents were also struggling with their retirement funds and found it difficult to continue their support. That's when my mother came to me and said, "Brittany, you're also a part of this family, so please help out a little." She expected me to shoulder the tuition fees for my nephews as if it were the most natural thing. "You're single and don't have children, so you must have some money to spare," she said without a hint of malice, as if it were my duty to sacrifice my life for the family. At that time, I might have still had some residual feelings for my family. Although I was angry at my brother and his wife's attitude, their children were innocent. I decided to help with the tuition to ensure they received a good education. However, that was a mistake. Chris came to view my assistance as something he was entitled to. What was even more troublesome was Vanessa. Once she found out that I was helping with Chris's children's tuition fees, she demanded, "You should also help my children in the same way. It's unfair if you're only helping Chris's kids." Her attitude, taking my goodwill for granted, filled me with anger and emptiness. They hardly ever said, "Thank you." Instead, I had even received remarks like, "For a high school grad, you're surprisingly well off," laced with sarcasm. Without my help, Chris's children wouldn't have been able to attend their current schools, but they never bothered to acknowledge that. Then, on that Christmas night, I was ridiculed by the entire family. Despite my financial contributions, they laughed and said, "A high school grad should sit on the floor." At that moment, I decided to withdraw all my support. I immediately contacted my lawyer. "I want to stop supporting my brother and sister's children's tuition fees immediately. Is there any problem with that?" The lawyer seemed a bit surprised but responded quickly, "As long as there's no written agreement, you are free to stop the support." Upon hearing this, I formally stopped paying the tuition fees. At the same time, I sent an email to Chris and Vanessa. "I have been supporting the tuition fees until now, but I will cease all support going forward. Please do not ask me for any financial support in the future." Minutes after sending the email, I received a call from Chris, which I ignored. Then, a message from Vanessa arrived. "What do you mean you won't pay the tuition anymore? Are you joking? Isn't it natural for family members to help each other out? Don't you feel sorry for the children?" I sighed and turned off my smartphone screen. Next, I began compiling evidence of my family's past behavior. This included insulting messages from my brother and sister, as well as recordings of the emotional abuse spoken by my mother at family gatherings. In fact, since high school, I had been secretly recording their behavior, thinking it might be useful someday. Every time they hurled contemptuous or insulting words at me, I suppressed my frustration and collected them as evidence. Now, the time had come for those recordings to have meaning. I organized all the evidence and submitted it to my lawyer. After carefully reviewing the materials, the lawyer said quietly, "Brittany, you have sufficient evidence for a defamation and emotional distress claim. If you wish to take legal action, we have everything we need." I nodded. "Please proceed." I was done being insulted and exploited by my family. I was ready to make them face the consequences of their actions. A few days later, formal notices were sent to my brother, sister, and parents. This was the true beginning of my revenge. The formal notice sent through the lawyer arrived at my family's homes exactly 2 weeks after the Christmas dinner. The contents were clear. The first was on immediate cessation of tuition support for my nephews and nieces. The second was on claims for defamation and emotional distress due to past insults and emotional abuse. The last one was a demand that they cease all contact with me going forward. As soon as this notice reached my family, my smartphone began ringing intensely with calls from Chris, Vanessa, my mother, my father, and even Michelle and Thomas. However, I ignored them all. I had already been in contact with a lawyer and arranged for all future interactions to be handled through my legal representative. A few days later, I received a surprising report from my lawyer. "Brittany, your brother Chris has hired a lawyer and is planning to object to the cessation of your support." I couldn't help but laugh. What exactly is he objecting to? I never signed a contract. I was merely assisting out of kindness. Exactly. Legally, you are under no obligation to continue the assistance. However, he is claiming that cutting off the support suddenly is unjust and could ruin his children's future. I sighed in disbelief. Did Chris think it was my duty to pay for his children's schooling? Why should I have to support his household to this extent? I am neither his wife nor his children's parents. Moreover, I owe them nothing. On the contrary, these are the people who have looked down upon me, mocked me, and insulted me. I told my lawyer firmly. Of course, I have no intention of making any concessions. Understood. I will send a formal response rejecting his claims. Subsequently, chaos seemed to spread among the family. First, Chris's household began to crumble. Without my financial support, he could no longer afford the tuition fees for Aaron and Wesley. He had always pretended to be more affluent than he was, even going into debt to maintain a luxurious lifestyle. The moment my support ended, his facade collapsed. Michelle panicked and blamed Chris. "What are we going to do? We can't live like this." She was only concerned about continuing her lavish lifestyle. If they couldn't afford the children's tuition fees, they shouldn't force them to attend a private school. Yet, she refused to accept that. Eventually, their marital conflicts became incessant, and I heard that Michelle had taken the children and gone back to her parents' house. Chris was left alone, struggling to pay for his children's education. Similarly, my sister Vanessa's household was in turmoil. Although she had always lived with the pride of being a highly educated, successful person, in reality, she was a housewife, and it was her husband, Thomas, who supported the family financially. Thomas was a calm and rational man. He had never insulted me, but he also never defended me at family gatherings. However, after I took legal action against the family, Thomas changed his attitude. If Brittany is serious about taking legal action, it must mean she was treated terribly, right? He confronted Vanessa after seeing the evidence and the numerous insulting messages I had submitted. Initially, Vanessa claimed it was just a joke and that I was overly paranoid, but Thomas became stern after reviewing the proof. "You've been mocking your sister to this extent? I never thought you were such a person." Thomas took the children and left home for a while. Despite Vanessa's desperate attempts to mend things, Their marriage cooled significantly. And as for my parents, they both sent me messages of apology. "Brittany, we're sorry. It was wrong of us to treat you that way. We're family. Let's stop fighting. Please forgive everyone." I scoffed at these messages. They're apologizing now. When I needed help from the family, they always ignored me. They belittled my efforts and continued to deny my worth. And now, at the moment I decided to abandon them, they say, "We're family?" I didn't respond. I simply told my lawyer, no action needed. Thus, the family fell apart. I didn't even bother to imagine how they felt, because it was no longer my concern. They were merely reaping the consequences of their actions. I was looking out the office window. Beyond the urban skyline, the setting sun cast a beautiful orange glow. It had been a while since I had the time to enjoy this view. I had been so engrossed in my work that I rarely took moments like this for myself. But now I am different. Freed from the shackles of my family, I had gained the freedom to live my own life. Ultimately, Chris's household collapsed completely without my support. Unable to make tuition payments, his children had to leave the prestigious schools. Aaron transferred to a public high school, and Wesley went to a local school. Chris's performance at work also declined, and he no longer had the means to keep up appearances. Accustomed to luxury, Michelle could not endure the lowered standard of living and eventually filed for divorce. Chris once looked down on me as the bottom of society. But what about him now? He had lost social standing and his family had disintegrated, becoming the low-income person he once despised. The irony. Vanessa also fell from grace. She was a person full of pride. She cherished her titles as highly educated, elite, and elegant housewife, looking down on those she deemed beneath her. But her husband Thomas, having seen the evidence I provided, had completely lost patience with her. Saying, "I cannot let such a person raise my children," Thomas decided to divorce Vanessa. Vanessa tried to contact him numerous times, but it was too late. And her life, too, changed drastically. Having depended on her husband, she lacked the ability to be independent. Unable to maintain her lavish lifestyle, she reluctantly started looking for part-time work. I heard that Vanessa, who once flaunted her elite status, started working as a cashier at a supermarket. I felt an indescribable emotion hearing this. Surely she must remember the times she looked down on me as she stood behind that register. And then my parents. They had favored my brother and sister over the years, continuously overlooking my existence. As a result, they had now lost their reliable children. Through the lawsuit, I formally requested my family to never contact me again. My parents received the notice through my lawyer and sent me multiple messages. "Brittany, don't abandon your mom and dad. Let's put the past behind us. We're family, after all. Let's start over." However, I deleted these messages unread. Had they ever treated me as family? Despite all my efforts and successes, they continued to look down on me because I was just a high school graduate. And now, only when they are in trouble, they say, "Help us because we're family." It took me 27 years to free myself from their shackles. But it's finally over. Afterward, I started a new life. I only associated with people who valued me, dedicating myself to work alongside colleagues I truly respected. Around me were people who judged me not by academic credentials, but by my effort and character. One day, President Brown said to me, "Brittany, you have truly grown. Education doesn't matter, you got here on your own merit." I smiled slightly and responded, "Thank you." For 27 years, I wanted my family's recognition. But that's no longer necessary. Now, I am living a life I can be proud of more than anyone else. Months later, on a whim, I visited a restaurant. It was the upscale restaurant where I had been insulted by my family that Christmas night. Instead of a private room, I chose an open seat by the window and sipped wine alone. The restaurant was as lively as that night, but my feelings were completely different. There, I was not the person who was looked down upon and ridiculed. I have become a successful person who has earned her place in life through her own efforts. I overheard a couple at the next table. Did you know? There's this incredible woman who became an executive at a major corporation recently. She's a high school graduate but climbed up through sheer effort. Wow, that's impressive. Education really doesn't matter, does it? I raised my glass and smiled subtly. Yes, I am no longer the family's failure.